Syrian jets have already been spotted taking off from that same airbase that was bombed just 5 days ago by the U.S. And Russia has positioned 2 warships off the coast of Syria. Elaine?
Well, Margaret, there's been a lot of forceful rhetoric from the United States, but is the U.S. offering anything in exchange for cooperation from Russia? What kind of leverage, realistically, does the U.S. have here?
Well, Elaine, there's no clear quid pro quo, so to speak, in terms of a transaction. But what the U.S. argument is, at least what Secretary Tillerson has been saying, is that this is Russia's chance at better relations with the United States. He said today, you can realign yourselves with us and the West. He stood beside all the world powers when he made that comment. Or, as he said to Russia in these public remarks, you can continue to remain isolated, standing only with Iran and its terrorist forces who are on the ground in Syria. So by making that argument, he's essentially saying your path back out of the cold and into the international community, perhaps even someday out under the weight of those financial sanctions, may be by being helpful on this front. There's also an argument to be made here that Vladimir Putin is facing an election in the year ahead, and he is feeling very much the economic weight of this continued war in Syria, not only in terms of dollars, but also in terms of body count. This is a war that Vladimir Putin promised his people would be short and easy and effective, and it has been none of those things so far, and it has only continue to add to the strain geopolitically on Russia. So Rex Tillerson will walk into those negotiations tomorrow and try to make that case to Russia's chief diplomat. But of course, what we're hearing from people who study the Kremlin here is that by backing Vladimir Putin into a corner, this actually might backfire on the Trump administration and make it next to impossible for Vladimir Putin to step away from Bashar al-Assad at a time when he, prior to the U.S. strikes, had been saying he wasn't so happy with some of the brutal activity that the Syrian dictator has undertaken.
And Margaret, what is the objective here for President Putin in comparing the U.S. strike on Syria to the U.S. invasion of Iraq?
Well, there is really no more painful point in recent memory when it comes to the U.S. intelligence community than when they have gotten things wrong. And obviously on the claim of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, that is something that hits very close to home for U.S. intelligence analysts. And remember, you've had President Trump be at odds with his own intelligence community since coming to office, questioning the veracity of some of their findings, including their claims that there are contacts between his aides and the Russian government itself. So by saying these things, President Putin is really hitting on rhetoric that strikes close to home for President Trump, may inject a level of uncertainty or what the White House today called disinformation. Disinformation is something that they continually accuse the Russian government of doing. Basically, that's the same thing as fake news, false alternative facts. It's things that they accuse the Russian government of spewing to confuse the situation and to try to cover up the truth of the matter, whether it comes to Russian military meddling in Ukraine, meddling in the U.S. or European elections, or what's actually happening on the ground in Syria.
Well, Margaret, you mentioned Rex Tillerson meeting with the Russian foreign minister, but Secretary Tillerson is not scheduled right now to meet with President Putin. What should we read into that?
Well, Vladimir Putin often keeps his American diplomats waiting, and I think very much tomorrow's meeting, whether or not it happens with him, will depend on how these first talks with Russia's chief diplomat, Sergei Lavrov, go. Remember, this was supposed to be the first visit by a Trump official to Russia to try to begin to reset relations. This is something that President Trump campaigned on and promised to the American people. Of course, all of that changed with these strikes against Syria last week that have really sparked a new divide between Russia, because of their patron Assad, and the U.S. analysis that not only did Assad carry out this vast war crime, but that the Russian government is helping him cover it up. So really, that dispute is overshadowing so much, and that is why, in many ways, it's in question whether or not that meeting between Vladimir Putin and Rex Tillerson would happen. You could easily say that Russia's top diplomat could fly anywhere in the world and meet with America's top diplomat. The reason to come to Moscow is to get time with Putin. So whether or not that meeting happens will definitely be a gauge of just how damaging or how successful these last few days have been.
A lot to watch. Margaret Brennan in Moscow for us. Margaret, thank you.